to deliver a session about youth co-production in terms of working with young people from secondary school and also some experiences of my work in primary school. I will introduce myself in terms of what's in my rucksack. So what do I carry? So I'm a lecturer in Goldsmiths on the program, in the Community Studies program, on the BA Social Science, Community Development and Youth Work, and also BA Social and Community. And I also teach across other programs such as social work. So I'm a lecturer, I'm a researcher, I'm a feminist, community developer, a youth worker, and above all, a feminist. So the local troublemaker, kind of, just, friendly troublemaker around here, inside and outside academia. Today's session, we're going to cover some radical pedagogies, youth co-production, examples of practice, a space, how do we create a space for youth voice and expression? How does this process of empowerment takes place, and also the benefit of that? My pledge today is not to talk at you, but actually to have a conversation about this. So I'll be learning as much as hopefully you guys are also learning with me. Is that a good agreement? Yeah. And also my other ask is, it's hard to teach sometimes, especially when the engagement is difficult, especially when young people and young children are not willing to engage with what we're teaching, but we do have the curriculum to teach. So I would like, if you do feel comfortable, is for you to take off the teacher coat and embody some of your difficult participants that you had in terms of engagement, and feel free to write on the chat if the session is not being engaging enough. Do write, Lara, yeah, I'm not engaged with this, so do better. Is that a good shout? Good call? If you're okay to do that? Yes? Can we have some hands? Yeah? Okay, brilliant. Brilliant. So we start by Paulo Freire. And obviously, all of you probably came across Paulo Freire, understand Paulo Freire, probably tired of hearing about Paulo Freire and how do we put this in practice. But I did use some of these quotes because for me, education is definitely just that, what Freire says. So for some of you that don't remember or never heard of Paulo Freire, the Brazilian educator that wrote The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, or in Portuguese, Pedagogia do Oprimido. And he talks about dialogue and praxis in education. How do you bank so you don't look at the student as empty canvases, but actually students already carry their lived experience, so they do have some knowledge. And how do we go on building knowledge from that start point and not on the point of their empty canvases? So Paulo Freire believes that education needs to be liberating, because if it's not liberating, it transforms those students that most of the time are oppressed, feeling that they need to become oppressors. Yeah. And also I like this other quote about education does not change the world. It changes people, and then people change the world. So Freire is one of them. And in terms of dialogue and the praxis, how do through the dialogue with the students, there is a process of empowerment, there's a process of awareness, there's a process of the word that's been translated to English, conscientization, which in Portuguese means consciencialização. Consciência means to have conscience, yeah? So far, so good? Brilliant. And then one of my favorite ones as well, which is bell hooks. And bell hooks has been, for me, since the beginning of my whole education. I've read probably most of her books. And I like this phrase about to educate as the practice of freedom is a way of teaching that everyone can learn. So the teaching the manner that respects and cares for the soul of student is essential. And sometimes in some of my research, I talk about love, bringing love into the workplace. And some colleagues will go, oh, that sounds like safeguarding. I do understand that, in the era of safeguarding policies, we do feel like when we go into work, we can't bring our human emotions into that. But actually, when we do apply for roles, when we have to work with community and young people and children, we are asked if we got passion. So we are asked for our human emotions. And once we're in, we're told not to use our human emotions. So again, I'm speaking from a perspective and epistemology of a youth worker, which allowed me probably way more freedom to work with young people than probably teachers from formal education will have. But yeah, Bell Hooks talks about teaching in a manner that respects and cares for the soul of the students is essential if we are to provide necessary conditions when learning can mostly be deeply and intimately begun. Yeah, begin. And then the next one is Henri Giraud. And I particularly like Henri Giraud, as I said in the beginning. First of all, as I said, I'm the local troublemaker, and I like everything that's radical. I like challenging. Um, I like not taking things for granted. I like looking from a perspective of reflection practitioner. How can we do things better? So in terms of border pedagogy, Henri Giraud talks about is an educational philosophy that empowers students to become border crossers. So that challenge from physical, cultural, and political boundaries, engaging into sometimes questioning, using that critical thinking to question dominant narratives in terms of the education, and all of this feeding and aiding into any process for social justice and social equity. Makes sense? We still following me? Yeah? So, youth co-production. Similar to what Freire was saying, Paul Freire was saying, young people, they're not mere empty canvases that we imprint knowledge. They bring their own knowledge. So in terms of youth co-production, the collaborative framework is that young people bring something. They already have some knowledge. So it's through that knowledge that we build or help them, support them into building on that knowledge. So these sessions first foster emotional growth, builds a sense of community by placing ownership into, they take agency in terms of the work that they're doing, and that creates empowerment and creates a sense of ownership and a sense of self. And some young people and children, normally children in primary school, they're not as they don't censor themselves the way by the time they get to secondary school, the society teaches them how to censor themselves. So children tend to be more spontaneous in terms of how they perform, how they express their feelings. By secondary school, normally by year 6, 7, that's when my experience says that's when young people start changing. So in terms of co-production, again, on research, for example, I'm in the process of creating a center for youth co-production. So the center aims to become researchers alongside young people, but young people are the one that define what topics we're going to research. So it's not a top-down approach when society is saying the moral panic, oh, young people are dangerous. Young people, when there's more than 5 of them in the group, in the gang. No. What actually is impacting young people? So young people become the researchers and they choose the topics, and we do the research in parallel with them, and also non-extractive, non-exploitative. Young people are paid for their time. So that's on the back burner here in Goldsmiths to create soon. And it's good to have young people participating because also it feeds into their conscience in what the citizenship means, having a voice, and how do you exercise your voice. Some of the examples of practice I'm going to share later on came on the discussions with young people in terms of how do you use your voice, what does participation means. Because even in terms of co-production and participation, there's always a power dynamic. And as a researcher, as a youth worker, I'm aware of that. And what I do in my work with young people is the first thing I do is to deconstruct that power dynamic within the boundaries of professionalism and professional boundaries, but I deconstruct that. By deconstructing, I also show in my vulnerability as a human being, not just as the educator, and that allows young people to engage with me differently. Yeah, everyone is following me so far. No one is falling asleep. No, okay, good. Have I got any feedback on my on my chat? No. This is a very, very engaging group. Very, very engaging group. Okay, so one example of practice was monuments, monumental slang. So we had this is based in Deptford in Southeast London. We had a project that was commissioned by the Mayor of London's office, and we were thinking about how to design the project. And I remember one day, finished work, and I was standing by the bus stop, and secondary school has just finished, so young people were all over, everywhere in the street. And then the chicken and chip shop was closed. But they didn't know that the chicken and chip shop was closed. So there was around 20 young people standing outside chicken and chip shop in the sideway near the bus stop, just occupying space and complaining about how Bossman just closed the chicken and chip shop for that day and they couldn't have access to their normal chicken and chip shop for that day. And I was just observing young people, and obviously the members of the public start complaining about how they're taking too much space, by the bus stop, and they couldn't move around. They had to go through the road to carry on with their journey. And I just, the first thoughts that I had at the time was young people are occupying space and they don't even realize how they're occupying space. And they're being perceived as member of public as just them disrupting, when actually there was a bit of occupation that took place, not to disrupt, but actually to complain about Bossman not having the chicken and chip shop open that day. So this is where the idea came from. So we had a 4-day workshop when young people look into how to occupy space. They look into the struggle, and this area has very much a colonial imperialist past. So they look into how to occupy space and what areas do they, I don't know if the QR code is working, but they've mapped where do they feel safe, where they don't feel safe. And at the time, I remember asking if they felt safe in Deptford, and some of them said, no, it's not safe. And the more I probe about why don't you feel safe about the areas where you go to school and you probably live, they didn't have an answer for that. And I came across, and at the end, the conclusion was they were being fed by the parents and by the school that the area where their school was situated was not safe. Young people themselves did not feel unsafe in that area. So it's about these conversations that we have with young people in terms of unpacking, because sometimes young people will reproduce what the adults around them are saying instead of actually exercising critical thinking, which for me, that is the brilliant gift that educators can give young people, exercising critical thinking. Whatever you see on social media, whatever you see on the streets or the narratives, is to think why and what's behind it. So this is how the project came about, and young people, they performed very well. So some of them done some work in terms of their identity. So from modifying some of their old school uniforms, and there was some beads, they altered the uniform completely. And some of them, they've done a role play about how they occupy space and how much harassment they suffer when they are on the street. By the time they finish school, no more than three of you in the shop to buy sweets. But actually, if it's adults, then all of us here today will be allowed to get into a shop and buy whatever product we need to buy. No one will say no more than 3 adults to come in because you guys are more likely to shoplift, when actually adults also shoplift. So young people done this role playing at a time about the harassment that they suffer when in public, if they go into Poundland, if they go to any shops, and how they're being told, don't stand there, stand here, don't do this, don't do that, you're not allowed this. And some young people have written some spoken words in terms of how they feel in education when they're being told to sit down and listen, and then I'll be given an opportunity to share from that bottom-up approach that Freire and Bell Hooks speaks of so highly of. The other project is the Alchemy Project. So the Alchemy Project is a music project that takes place here in Goldsmiths on Saturdays. So it initially started in 2017 when, in this particular school in this area, a young person was stabbed. And the music teacher realized that young people didn't know how to process the emotions regarding what took place. So he reached out to Goldsmiths to create sort of a pilot project to engage young people in something creative, and this way helping them into exploring more their feelings regarding what took place in school. From a 3 weeks pilot project in the summer, currently, it takes place every Saturday here in Goldsmiths. Young people from the local school occupy the music department, and they can either learn new instruments or carry on practicing, writing songs, collaborating with other young people from the other school. And at the time, I was working at the Alchemy, and I remember two young people coming from different schools, and two of them in separate occasions told me, I'm not here to make friends. I'm just here to learn how to do my rapping, my lyrics, my spoken words, my anything to do with music, and I don't want to make friends. And months later, they were collaborating. So this project at the time also helped to bridge this rivalry that young people sometimes have because they got different uniform, they come from different schools. And as adults, we probably don't know how serious, they will call it a beef, how serious the beef is when actually you're not from my school, so I'm not allowed to be your friend. I don't like you because you're not from school. And I heard that your school is full of troublemakers. So Alchemy Project does that. And then with funding, later on, years later, what we managed to do is young people that started at the age of 14, and some of them with SEN needs, by the age of 18, if they could carry on or be part of the Alchemy, they go on into this Alchemy Masters process, and they become themselves facilitators of the project. So they start mentoring young people, and they're paid for that. They start mentoring young people engaging on a project. So the project was a music project, but with the basis of the youth work. So I was a youth worker, senior youth worker on the project. And some of my work was not only in the morning, looking at them saying, how was your week? And normally by the way they walk, by the way they talk, I could tell that they didn't have a good week at school. So we kind of went explaining and talking about what took place in school. And then they were like, actually, Lara, I'm going to write some rap about how I feel. I'm going to write a song about this. So it's how creativity and youth work kind of connected at the Alchemy. I should have put the link here. I just realized, and I haven't put the link for the Alchemy, although I think from that link, you can see some of the projects. So that took place. And some of my work was also bridging the gap between the young person and the parents. For example, every time GCSE came, young people that wanted to choose music as their choices, you have some parents saying, no, that is not a choice. There's no future in creativity. So I had to have this conversation with the parents about, is the passion first and then the money will come. If someone is doing something that they're passionate about, they will find a way of having an income. So Alchemy, currently we have, I think so far, around 6 young people that are in my degree doing a social science, community development and youth work degree to become themselves youth workers and community developers. And some participants of the Alchemy went on doing a music degree. So it's about building their self-esteem in terms of young people that are referred from the schools like they're not achieving much, they're actually troublemakers. And once they engage a project like Alchemy, they learn some skills about them. And normally once a year we have a showcase, and the parents are quite surprised about how skillful and how talented young people are. And then it's my turn now to tell the parents about how their children are so talented. So it's that process of the parents themselves trying to understand and getting to know their young person. Because teenagers, once they become teenagers, they shut the door, and once in a while they'll open a window to say good afternoon, good morning, I'm bored, or what is there to eat? And normally that's when the time to engage and have some sort of how are we going? How is school? How's your friends? So that kind of conversations, that's what took place in the Alchemy. Everyone is following me. I'm just mindful that I'm talking at you. Yeah? Any questions so far? So in terms of also examples of practice, some years ago, I've done this intervention for this charity. It was during lockdown, actually. We were working with children from year 6 transitioning to year 7. And some of them, they were quite scared about what big school means, going to big school. So some of the sessions was about, for example, safety. One of the sessions was about me bringing my Mr. Tumbles bag with arts and crafts, and let's make a key ring because you're now going to have a key. You're going to be responsible for your key. What does that mean? How do you feel about that? So this particular session was about safety. in the road. And at the time, I had this lanyard, so they very much liked the fact that they could do their safety cards and talk about what were their fears and anxieties about not having mom or dad doing my school run. I have to do it by myself. And one of them was quite creative because he put the beady eyes. That means all eyes on him, but he was also all eyes in terms of navigating the road and being safe. The other one was, and this is a particular one, because what I used to do is just by, obviously, I always had a plan in the back of my head in terms of where they could go with this. But the one at the top was just empty puzzles. And my challenge to them was to do a puzzle about their own lives. So in terms of, for example, school, in terms of the life, home life, in terms of friendship, and in terms of school, in terms of family and the bits that they love. So they color it and they kind of build the puzzle in terms of, and the question was like, why is your school life, why did you color it black? And they will talk about sometimes not feeling very welcome in school, sometimes having some issues with some teachers, sometimes having some issues with some friends, or struggling to make friends. And from there, we start building the conversation. And they will very happily take this home. And the parents will email me saying, oh, because of this session, actually, they came and had a conversation with me about this, about that. So that's how we explore the identity. The reflection book, and both of them, I think that this particular young person called Kamari that said that he was going to be a prime minister, and that's why he made his name badge with the beady eyes. And also, obviously, slime. Slime always works for young people, making the slimes. And I turned into, again, I was a bit of, before you guys joined in, I was saying about how I wanted to learn sign language and how Mr. Tumbles, when my children were younger, I used to love Mr. Tumbles. So during the 6 to 7 months, I think the project lasted, I was a Mr. Tumble. I would go to Aston Crafts and buy everything possible and just, let young people tell me, what can we do about this? And I'll give them the topic, or sometimes themselves will come up with the topic in terms of what we can do. So Kamari done the book of reflections because he was going on holidays to Caribbean, and he would like to go on the cruise. He will have his headphones, but what he's going to do during the holidays is to reflect about the transition to secondary to year 7 and how he could improve himself. So the terms, including things like self-reflection at the time for year 6 going year 7, because it's quite tricky for them. They're not teenagers, but also they're probably ready to leave primary school. So it's a brilliant age to engage with because they're ready to have some conversations. And I must admit, I did have loads of fun with this project. So in terms of the process of empowerment, I've spoken a lot to you so far, and we're nearly done, I promise. In terms of the empowerment, I probably don't need to say this because all of you being teachers, how, the education brings empowerment when there's an engagement. So in terms of co-production and working in some sessions like co-producing and supporting them into this, it's about shifting the power. It's about breaking that power dynamic. So in order for that to take place, it requires a shift in the power and responsibility. That becomes their project. I'm supporting you. What do you think? And when they ask you, what should I do about this? What do you think? And that's the most powerful thing you can do, especially a teenager that doesn't want to think. What do you think? What about questions, open questions that they have to reflect on that? So the power dynamic, the capacity, and we already, spoken about capacity and time to do this, which I'm totally understand and I know. And also in terms of fostering trust, by engaging with them in something that they're able to create themselves and feel proud of creating something, it fosters an engagement with a trusted adult that obviously as teachers, I don't need to tell you this, there is something that they can carry in terms of going forward for that future when they have someone, a trusted adult to work to, that trusts them before they even perform, before they even engage in the project. That my expectation of you, they're already high. I know you're going to do well. Like young people say, it's called gassing you up. When you're a teenager, When I tell you you're going to be brilliant, in the slang it's called, I'm going to gas you up. And they'll tell me, why are you gassing me up, Lara? Why are you gassing me up? Because I know you're going to do well. And 9 out of 10, they do, because well, Lara trusts me, so I need to perform now. And it's brilliant to see what they come up with at the end. Yeah, so the benefits in terms of the young people, it brings, again, a self of belonging, a self of worth, a self of individual. They learn about the individual strength. We don't have time, but we could have gone into, social theories about Johari's windows, when we all have different windows, and some of them, if they're not explored in terms of our abilities, they're quite closed. The more reflective you are, you start slowly opening the Johari's windows. So young people in this work, in co-production, when you work with them, exactly that. And like Freddy says, that dialogue is a process that you respect their opinion, and no opinion is silly. What do you think about that? Oh, so what were you planning to do? So it's that dialogue with young people that they build, because themselves, most of the time, they do have the answer. They just need someone to say, oh, that's a brilliant idea. Oh, actually, have you thought about something else different? And obviously, empowerment and confidence, self-esteem, identity, self-purpose in education. And lastly, citizenship. You learn about being engaging and learning about, oh, I've got a voice, and how do I use my voice? Especially when they're teenagers, there's not much space that they can use their voice. Many times they're invited to the table for their voice, but very rarely they actually, as adults, listening to them. So the benefits in terms of the young people. In terms of the children, you make young children experts by experience. So again, when they're in primary school, less filters, they're way more creative. They can explore their self-confidence and communication skills. And also in terms of independence and peer work and how they work with others. They might not like each other, but how do we work together? And actually, after you worked with so-and-so, you learn that actually we've got loads in common. How to also, and some of it is taken to the classroom, because some of the conflict that sometimes as teachers you have to be in the middle and mediate, some of it in working collaboratively with each other, there's a positive consequence that comes from that. And also, obviously, all of us working with young people and children, the more engaged we are, more relevant this type of work is. Okay, then, party people, I think that's us done. I hope you have enjoyed the session. You have my email on the slides that Lori can share with you guys. And do be in touch, and hopefully we'll see each other in another time.